Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our panel session to discuss how we are overcoming the barriers that have presented themselves for COVID. So if I may just sort of dive straight in and maybe turn to, excuse me, my government colleagues first, and just ask Marian, maybe you could start for us at the DIT. So how was it for you in the first flush of COVID?
Sure. So we have a field force of international trade advisors who normally advise companies on how to sell overseas. And we immediately, as soon as the lockdown happened, we switched that remit to supporting any business to keep trading, whether that was internationally or domestically. And I would say, broadly speaking, they helped companies in three ways. So very practical advice, so how to access government support, getting our network overseas to help them get paid, finding substitutes for inputs to their production processes that they couldn't get anymore. So that was the first way. The second way was changing their business model. So in particular, we helped a number of people to set up online sales if they weren't currently selling online, and also to switch from selling wholesale to selling direct to the consumer. So particularly if you were in an industry like hospitality and that was in lockdown, then you needed to find new markets quickly. So we helped people to look at that. And then finally, we help people with retooling. So people who run small and medium enterprises are usually incredibly busy. And so suddenly quite a few people had time on their hands. And so that was a great opportunity for us to actually work through that plan for how to enter the Japanese market, or how to make use of the mutual recognition agreement in the United States. We could really help them to think about their plans for the future. So that was broadly what we did.
Well, that's fantastic. And Ken, you're from the British Business Bank, so you've been in the news and so on with how much work and things you've been doing. So maybe tell us a little bit about how that went.
Yes, so British Business Bank is the country's sort of national development bank. We had programs that supported SMEs to get finance, very much focused on finance gaps. And then, of course, COVID hit, and the needs changed to an order of magnitude. I think in the first 6 months of the year, we made about as much money available as we'd made in the previous 5 years. So it really was a big step up. I think we're at something like 60 billion now of money that we've sort of helped get into companies. So I mean, I think the sort of very COVID-related schemes are things like the coronavirus business interruption loans, CBILS as we call it, and then a little bit later the bounce back loans, which were sort of smaller loans but much quicker to get. And the bit that I've been involved in is the Future Fund, where we recognised that equity investors were going to have some trouble, particularly during that first lockdown, but on an ongoing basis, getting out and meeting companies and making investments. So we put in a co-investment program, very rules-based co-investment program that would be sort of easy to attract money alongside those existing investors. So one of my favourite quotes is that nobody in British Business Bank was adding to the flour shortage and catching up on their baking. We had a very, very busy few months.
We might come on to a question like that at the end. Top tips for being at home. Well, look, and how for both of you is it kind of moving from the initial shock of the realization that COVID was having a dramatic effect to where we are today and how we might look, say in 3 months, 6 months time? How has the business been adjusting, and what are you sort of saying now to your customers? So, Marian, maybe.
Yeah, well, so we are very much encouraging them to look at how to plan their international expansion. We do know that businesses that actually have a plan, as opposed to being what we call accidental exporters, who just happen to overseas, they do much better. So we're very much encouraging them to plan. We're very much introducing them to our peer-to-peer support through our export champions that we have. So that's people who've done the journey before, obviously telling them about UK export finance as we normally do. But also I would say we're doing more technical support. So how to make the most of free trade agreements. So the digital clauses in the recent Japan free trade agreement that we've negotiated, or the mutual recognition agreement that we have on testing certification with the US, and a raft of other technical elements in our trade agreements. We're doing more and more work on that. And we've also launched a new export growth plan in the levelling up areas. So an internationalisation fund. So that's where small and medium enterprises can get match funding to help them with the aspects of exporting that they're maybe less confident, like how do you find the right distributor in a foreign market? How do you shortlist which one is the best one for you to go to? How do I get legal advice on getting start setting up in the US, those types of things. And we've also upweighted our activity in those levelling up areas as well in different ways.
Good. Well, that's fantastic. Ken, any sort of breaking news on your side? What are we likely to expect from the British Business Bank? More of the same?
Well, certainly the immediate COVID response schemes have been extended to the end of January.
Right.
But we're also we're planning for sort of what comes next after those. We recognise that businesses have on the whole borrowed a lot more than they had before. We've always been very active in the sort of levelling up agenda. Things like Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund, Midlands Engine Investment Fund. You may have seen in the spending review, we've had a top up to the Northern Powerhouse Fund, which was the first fund we launched. We operate sort of mostly through partners, so through fund managers or through the banks. There is a startup loans company, of course, which is out there helping would-be entrepreneurs get their first step on the ladder. I think what we've seen across our portfolios is a sort of mixed impact from COVID. Some companies have done very well. Companies involved in home delivery, for example, whereas other companies are sort of struggling a bit. But I think in a sort of similar way to Marian, we've seen a lot of companies that have had the opportunity to look at what they're doing, maybe pivot, and certainly plan for the future. So those support programs that we had before, those venture funds, the debt funds, they will continue. But we're also very closely looking at what the needs of SMEs are going to be as we sort of come out of the sort of come out into that post-COVID world.
Good. Well, look, we've heard from our government side. Maybe let's turn to our customers and to our exporters. Needless to say, I'm sure you haven't been at home baking for hours on end either. So maybe you could sort of tell us a little bit about how the challenges you've been experiencing, the barriers perhaps, and maybe how you've been overcoming them. So maybe we turn to Colin first. From your perspective.
Sure. Okay. I suppose if I think our kind of the three components, we've got our sales or business development, we've got our supply chain, and we've got our operations functions. For us, probably we were lucky enough that our supply chain function wasn't really impacted at all. Operations then a little bit. Because we export so much, so about 75% of our sales are exported overseas. As part of our product offering, where we sell capital equipment to customers, we actually have to go abroad and commission that equipment. So back at the time, it was a challenge getting people around the world into different places to be able to commission the equipment. Some was surmountable, and some just weren't. Like, for example, we haven't been able to get anybody into Australia. Since COVID has started. But generally speaking, we're able to kind of to do things to counteract them. I guess the biggest challenge that we would have seen would have been on the sales side, and again, it's driven because so much of our sales are exported. So previously, before March, all of our business would have been done on planes. A lot of people in the company would have been flying all across the world to meet customers, to build up the rapport with them, to to take them to see existing sites and existing installations is a very important way we would have sold. So we could have been speaking to a customer in a country and maybe flow them to another country to see an installation, because it's quite niche, quite specialist equipment. So that obviously has been really, really tricky. I guess I suppose the world appreciates that. So we have definitely found that the world is much more amenable. I mean, even this, for example, we're doing this over Teams. And I guess a year ago, you wouldn't have thought this could have been done over Teams. So we're finding the same things with our sales, with our sales process and our sales pipeline. Yes, it would be much easier and much preferable to do it in person across a desk, and you can build up a personal relationship with the customer. That's just impossible at the moment. So what we were able to do is we're able to I guess, chomp through our pipeline and our sales funnel. We're able to take the deals through there that were already in there because we've met them, and as I said, the customers are happy to sort of conclude the deals over Zoom or over Teams. But certainly looking forward, the challenge will be, how do you make sure that you're speaking to new potential customers to close those deals next year or the year after? So that's certainly going to be a challenge. But I guess I think this has shown how adaptable everyone is, us as a business, but also our customer base. We were lucky enough that our customers were mostly considered within the sort of a key industry. So none of our customers shut down, which then meant that kind of our customers were open for business. So it's just really about how we get in front of them has probably been our biggest challenge through this, I would say. Right.
Yeah, Colin, thank you for that. And I think that's a really important point about the pipeline and how to keep that filled. So maybe we'll come back to that in a minute. Peter, how's it been for you, your business?
Yeah, quite different from Colin's experience. We did have some significant challenges to supply chain in the early days. Around April, May time, the availability of plastic was significantly shorter than it would usually be. Essentially, we work within an industry of fabrication, but most specifically application of hard coatings to plastics. And obviously for COVID, screens and sneeze guards and the many
in high demand.
Were very, very high demand. And our fabrication, our coating capabilities are exceptionally high, but our fabrication is much lower. But we were actually very fortunate. We've got a really good set of suppliers both in the UK and abroad, so we were able to adapt and ensure that we were able to bring in the required materials that we needed, but also then share that with our other customers and to make sure that the most important thing, and it was quite a good thing for the industry as a whole, or the industry that we operate within, that everyone did seem to work together with that view that it was all about making sure that we got the product to the businesses that needed them so they could open up as quickly as possible. So you didn't have a small number of companies holding on to materials and trying to make sure they were the only ones. Everybody shared really well to ensure that we got these screens to where they needed to be so businesses could be COVID safe, compliant and open up. So there were challenges. We were able to overcome them. Operationally, we obviously saw a significant increase in demand in certain areas of our business, and we needed to adapt. In doing so, we have taken on new plant, new equipment to increase capacity, and that's always a challenge at any time, at the best of times when you're very busy, and it's difficult to go and view equipment or get things in, have surveys carried out. There were big challenges at that stage as well. In a similar nature to Colin's company, not being able to go and meet customers, sit face to face, build a rapport, that's definitely something that's a big challenge. We would usually, in order to identify the best solution for a customer, we would usually meet with them, talk to them about ideas, understand more about what they do, what they're trying to achieve, what their end aim is, and then give them solutions and guide them towards the right the right end product. So that's certainly a big challenge, and it's really difficult to do that in this nature by a video call. So hopefully in the not too distant future, we might be able to ease back towards having face-to-face visits, but that remains to be seen.
And just sort of listening in there to what Colin and Peter have been saying, Marian, you know, to the extent that we in government can be thinking about helping that connecting, bridging, if you like, opportunity where sales opportunities may well be sourced or found, and you know, passing them back to the customer groups, like Peter's company, like Colin's. How do you feel that side of our government operations could be working?
So it's a really tricky problem, and I recognise, just how tough that is. I think there are probably two sides to it. So I talked about the planning work. I think that, you know, whilst I completely agree that face-to-face contact is really important, I think that sometimes if you're really focused on who you're trying to see, then there are ways to get to see them, and particularly using our contacts overseas, we can help people to get in over Zoom to see someone. So I would encourage people to talk to their trade advisor and talk to DIT more generally about who they think they want to meet. And then we can find other ways perhaps for them to meet them than, you know, the sort of informal ways that we often use. I think we're also exploring, although we haven't yet resolved what to do about virtual trade shows and how far they're an opportunity. And I think for building those relationships, that's a tough one. I think there's a book to be written on, you know, can you do virtual drinks with people and build that relationship in the same way that you can do it sort of in person. And I think I don't have a magic bullet for that one.
Mm. Well, look, I'm from the Export Credit Agency as the moderator, and finance is in our DNA. I'm interested really in your comments, Peter and Colin, about how you know the general financing side of your business and how you've been able to protect it, but also to have sufficient resources to make, you know, the next steps to continue to build your businesses. You know, to the extent that you've used either of the ECAs or the British Business Bank, other forms of government support, but also the banks. You know, the banks are an integral part to all that we do. So I wondered if you had any thoughts around how that's operated through the last few months with COVID and so on. Peter, have you do you want to start?
Yeah, no, thank you. So we obviously, with a shortage of materials and supply chain issues, you need cash availability. You need to be able to source product, and if you're sourcing that from abroad, from companies you haven't previously bought from, you need cash. In most instances, we had to buy a large volume of material up front, and support has generally been quite good with regards to the bank. If I'm honest, the revenue and customs support allowing for VAT return and PAYE payments to be deferred in the first couple of months actually was very, very helpful when it comes to cash flow. That did allow us to be able to source some materials that in other circumstances we would not have been able to. And so we took advantage of that. And thereafter, as we saw an increase in demand, and as I said, we needed to invest in certain plant and equipment, and we've also done so more recently. We did take advantage of the CBIL scheme, so we're able to secure a level of cash that was in very favourable terms in other circumstances that we may not have been able to secure. So that's certainly been of great help to us as a business, and we added that to a combined asset finance scheme, so that the bank that we dealt with were very, very helpful, very flexible in the kind of facility they were able to offer because of the government-backed CBIL scheme. And we were very fortunate also to be able to tie that within an investment scheme grant that was provided by the New Anglia LEP. And so we've been actually very well supported, to be honest.
Well, I'm sure there'll be more questions in the Q&A from people listening into this discussion, and it's really good to see that you've had such access to the government support schemes that are out there. Colin, do you have a similar kind of view? Do you have a similar experience of how you're a much bigger business and in terms of its size, but no doubt the same issues come up every time.
Yeah, for sure. Different industry and different size, you say, but suppose quite similar challenges. So just like Peter had said, we were able to take advantage of VAT, NIC and PAYE deferral kind of for the first few months in springtime. And also the furlough scheme as well, I mean, was, I suppose, very welcome. So yeah. As kind of not directly related to the question that you're asking at this stage, Gordon, but one of the things very, like in April, things looked very dark. We didn't quite know how things were going to pan out. And as I sit here now, looking back sort of 6 or 7 months, our business now is in a much better, and the order book and everything is in a much better position, probably than if you're sitting in my bedroom in April thinking back. It was like, how is the world going to stop? Is everyone going to pay? Are people going to keep the money? But as a general point, I think business has been very resilient, and actually the trading conditions and everything has probably been better than I thought they were going to be, which is it's just a nice aside. Because I wasn't sure where that was going to go to. The one other thing that I would ask is, or would add, and probably it hasn't been mentioned at this stage, but I'm going to introduce the dreaded B word. So as well as COVID, I mean, I think the elephant in the room for well. So as I said, we sell capital equipment to customers all around the world. And the main noticeable thing I have seen is that while customers may still give us advance payments and will make milestone payments to us, there's now a much greater demand for bank guarantees, where they're saying, look, if we're going to send you money before we see equipment, we want to make sure our money's secure. So we've always worked very closely with our bank and have had we have a facility, a guarantee facility to accommodate that. But the mixture between Brexit, between people being a little bit, foreign companies being a little bit more uncertain dealing with the UK company, because they just don't know what it's going to mean. It's maybe a bit of scare sort of mongering from on their side, but the reality is the customer has this thing where we're now going to buy from a UK company. That introduces extra risk. So you have that, and you've got the COVID as well, where everyone just, as I said, concerned about keeping cash. So as a result of that, as well as speaking very closely with our bank, we currently right now have an application in with UK Export Finance for the bond support scheme. So we've recently won a large contract in Europe, and there's a sizable advance payment guarantee required, and we're in the process of just moving that across to UK Export Finance. Now, being a Northern Ireland company, that also has its own challenges, where our banking system is slightly different. Doesn't have the same kind of strong base of mainland GB banks that there would be across over here. So, for example, I've been told that I'm bank with Ulster Bank, and we are the first customer that Ulster Bank have had to go onto this scheme. So that in itself then has some teething problems at all sides, let's just say. But it's something that you have to go through it to come out the other end. But I'm looking forward to that coming through for us.
Well, Colin, look, slight little advert for us, I guess, but we formally launched our new UKEF product, the General Export Facility, and that is very much designed to allow you and the bank to have a package of financing available to you, be it for a bond or for working capital and so on. And it's tied to your overall business, not to specific contracts. So I'm hoping that we can work with you and, of course, with Ulster Bank. And if they are the next bank into the scheme, I will be absolutely delighted, because we are looking for new banks. So little advert from me there.
I'll see what I can do.
Well, listen, everyone, I think we've probably just sort of edged into the red zone on the timer. I very much appreciate your thoughts and comments, observations. I think, that the pipeline and making sure that the pipeline is rich and diverse and it is there for the future is absolutely critical. We look forward to helping you keep that pipeline as strong as we can possibly do. And when it comes to those building of relationships, we also hope that we can get out there as soon as we possibly can and re-establish, I think, the those relationships that we're always known for. We're, as Brits, and I do say it as Brits, you know, we trade with the world, and we always have, and we're around this table, I think, dedicated to doing so. So thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning, and I'll hand us back to the Q&A and look forward to your comments, I would say, when we do get some Q. Thank you very much.